The rock climbers saw her on their third day searching the canyon. September afternoon in Zion National Park, they were rappelling down a side canyon most tourists never saw when Jake Martinez spotted movement on the opposite wall. He stopped mid-rope, hanging 200 feet above the canyon floor, and stared. A platform. Wooden platform suspended from the canyon wall by steel cables, maybe 6 feet by 4 feet. And on that platform, pressed against the rock face, was a woman. She wasn't waving, wasn't calling for help, just standing there, perfectly still, like she'd been carved from the same sandstone that surrounded her. Jake grabbed his radio. "I've got eyes on something. West wall, maybe 300 feet up. Looks like a person on some kind of platform." His climbing partner, Chen, swung over, raised binoculars. "Oh my God. Jake, that's her. That's Rebecca Chen, the missing hiker from June." Jake looked through his own binoculars. The woman's face was sunburned dark, hair matted. She wore what might have been hiking clothes 3 months ago, now just rags. But she was alive, standing on a platform suspended in a canyon where no platform should exist, 300 feet above ground, 200 feet below the rim, in a location so remote that 3 months of searching had never found her. Anna screamed into her radio. "We found her! We found Rebecca Chen! She's alive!" If you want to hear more incredible survival stories like this, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We upload new videos every week about cases that will leave you speechless. Now, let's continue with what might be the most disturbing captivity case in modern history. On June 14, 2024, Rebecca Chen woke at 5:15 a.m. to the sound of her alarm playing a podcast about ultralight backpacking. She reached for her phone without opening her eyes. Habit developed over 5 years of serious hiking, and silenced it with the efficiency of someone who'd practiced leaving before dawn hundreds of times. Her apartment in Salt Lake City smelled like the oatmeal she'd cooked the night before and packed in a thermos. Cold oatmeal with nuts and dried fruit. 300 calories. Efficient fuel. Rebecca had optimized every aspect of her backpacking over the years. She knew exactly what she needed and exactly what was extra weight. At 32 years old, she'd hiked sections of the Pacific Crest Trail, completed the Colorado Trail, and was working toward through-hiking the Continental Divide Trail next summer. She was a systems analyst for a tech company during the week, a wilderness athlete on weekends, 2 completely different versions of the same person. This weekend, she was hiking the Narrows in Zion National Park, 16-mile one-way trek through the Virgin River Canyon. She'd done it twice before, knew the route, knew the permits, knew the dangers. She loaded her Tacoma with gear, ultralight tent, sleeping bag rated to 30 degrees, water filter, first aid kit, bear spray, satellite messenger device that pinged her location every hour. Her backpack weighed exactly 18 pounds, including food and water. She'd weighed it twice. She texted her roommate Claire. "Zion Narrows, one night, back Sunday, sat messenger active." Claire responded, "Stay safe, crazy person. Bring me a cool rock." Rebecca drove. Salt Lake City to Zion took 4 hours and 47 minutes. I-15 south through Utah landscape that transitioned from mountains to Red Rock Desert. She listened to podcasts about ultralight gear and desert ecology. Stopped once for gas and trail mix. The Zion Canyon parking lot was full when she arrived at 10:33 a.m. Peak season. Hundreds of tourists. She took the shuttle to the Narrows trailhead and started hiking. The Narrows began where the paved trail ended. The Virgin River filled the entire canyon floor. Hikers walked in the river, waded through water that ranged from ankle-deep to waist-deep depending on the section. Rebecca had good water shoes, neoprene socks, hiking poles for balance. She'd done this before. She started walking upstream. The canyon walls rose 500 feet on either side, sheer sandstone colored in bands of red, orange, white. The river flowed cold and clear. Other hikers passed going downstream. Day hikers mostly. Families with kids. Photographers with expensive cameras in waterproof bags. Rebecca nodded greeting but didn't stop to chat. She was hiking to Wall Street, the narrowest section of the canyon 12 miles upstream. She'd camp there, wake at dawn to photograph the light, then hike out Sunday. She had a permit, had registered her route, had everything planned. By 2 p.m., she'd left the day hikers behind. The canyon got quieter, deeper. The walls closed in until they blocked direct sunlight even at midday. Just reflected light bouncing between sandstone walls. At 4:30 p.m., Rebecca reached Wall Street. The canyon narrowed to 15 feet wide. Walls rose straight up 600 feet. It was like standing at the bottom of a crack in the earth. She found a sandy beach 50 yards before Wall Street. Good camping spot. High enough above the water line to be safe from flash floods. She set up her tent. Another hiker was camped nearby. Solo male hiker. Maybe 40. Good gear. He waved friendly greeting. Beautiful evening, he said. Slight accent. European, maybe. Yeah, Wall Street at sunset is amazing. First time here? Third. You? Lost count. He smiled. I'm David. I volunteer with Zion Search and Rescue. Lead training hikes for new volunteers, teaching them the backcountry routes. Rebecca relaxed. Search and rescue volunteer meant legitimate, meant experienced, meant safe. I'm Rebecca. I'm just here for photos in solitude. Well, you picked the right spot. Not many people camp this far up. Most turn around at Wall Street. He returned to his own camp. Respectful distance. Appropriate outdoorsman behavior. Rebecca cooked dinner on her ultralight stove. Dehydrated pasta. Hot chocolate. She sat on her sleeping pad watching the canyon walls turn orange in the setting sun. David stayed at his camp, reading a book, not bothering her. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed safe. At 8:45 p.m., Rebecca climbed into her tent, set her alarm for 5:30 a.m. to catch sunrise, activated her satellite messenger to ping her overnight location, sent a text through the device to Claire. Camped at Wall Street. Beautiful. See you tomorrow. She fell asleep, listening to the Virgin River flowing past. At 3:47 a.m., she woke to someone unzipping her tent. Rebecca's eyes flew open. Dark. Too dark. She grabbed her headlamp, turned it on. David stood at her tent entrance, holding something. Chemical smell. Sweet and wrong. I'm sorry, he said, but I need you to understand something about canyons, about depth, about being suspended between earth and sky with nowhere to go. Rebecca tried to scream. The cloth covered her mouth, chemical-soaked. The smell filled her nose and throat. She fought, kicked, connected with his chest. He grunted but didn't let go. Just breathe. This is the hard part. What comes next teaches you about patience, about waiting, about existing in impossible places. The chemical pulled her down into darkness. The last thing Rebecca heard was David's voice saying words that didn't make sense. You're going to learn what it means to be suspended, to hang between places, to wait for a rescue that might never come. That's the lesson. Then nothing. When Rebecca didn't check in Sunday morning, Claire called her. No answer. She called again at noon. 1 p.m. 2 p.m. At 3 p.m., Claire checked the satellite messenger website. Rebecca's last ping showed 8:47 p.m. Saturday at Wall Street in the Narrows. No pings since. At 4:30 p.m., Claire called Zion National Park Rangers. At 6 p.m., search and rescue was mobilized. By 8 p.m., 24 SAR volunteers were hiking into the Narrows with headlamps and emergency equipment. They reached Wall Street at 10:45 p.m., found Rebecca's tent, still set up, sleeping bag inside, backpack, all her gear, her satellite messenger on the tent floor, battery dead. No Rebecca. They searched through the night, called her name, checked every side canyon, every alcove, every beach, every possible place someone could go. Found nothing. Dawn search brought helicopters, infrared cameras scanning for heat signatures, drones flying through sections too narrow for helicopters, teams of searchers spreading through every tributary canyon within 5 miles. They found nothing. K9 units arrived on day 2. 3 dogs trained in wilderness tracking. They picked up Rebecca's scent at her tent, followed it downstream 200 yards. Then the scent vanished. Not weak. Vanished. Like she'd been lifted into the air. The search became massive. 300 volunteers. National Park Service. Washington County SAR. Utah Division of Emergency Management. Volunteers from neighboring counties. Everyone who could be called was called. They searched for 12 days. Helicopters flew every daylight hour. Technical climbing teams rappelled into sections no hiker could reach. Divers checked the Virgin River pools. Cave specialists explored side canyons with slot sections. They found nothing. Rebecca's parents flew in from San Francisco, her sister from Seattle. Her roommate Claire never left the search staging area. Media coverage intensified. Salt Lake woman vanishes from Zion Narrows ran on every Utah news station. Photos of Rebecca hiking, Rebecca at work, Rebecca smiling on a mountain summit. On day 13, rangers held a press conference. We've exhausted all reasonable search areas. With no evidence of foul play and no leads on Rebecca's location, we're transitioning from active search to passive monitoring. If new information emerges, we'll resume. Claire collapsed. Rebecca's mother screamed at the rangers. She didn't just disappear. Someone took her. You're giving up. But they weren't giving up. They'd searched everywhere humanly possible. The canyon had simply swallowed Rebecca Chen whole. But one volunteer kept searching. David Morrison, the search and rescue volunteer who'd been training new team members, who'd been on every single search day, who'd led teams into the most remote sections, who'd stayed longer than anyone else each day. He knew the canyon better than anyone. He'd designed his search patterns to look thorough while avoiding one specific area, the area where Rebecca actually was, 300 feet up a side canyon wall, suspended on a platform he'd built 6 months earlier, waiting, existing in the impossible space between cliff face and sky. Learning about patience. Rebecca regained consciousness slowly. First sensation was heat, desert sun baking her skin. Second was thirst, mouth dry as dust. Third was fear. She couldn't move her arms. They were secured behind her back. Zip ties, professional grade. She pulled. They didn't budge. Her eyes opened. She was on a platform. Wooden platform maybe 6 feet long, 4 feet wide. The platform was attached to steel cables that ran up to bolts drilled into the canyon wall 30 feet above. She could see the bolts. Professional climbing anchors, the kind that held thousands of pounds. Below the platform was empty space. She was suspended. Looking down made her stomach drop. 200 feet of air to the canyon floor. She could see boulders, scattered vegetation, a dry wash. Looking up showed more sandstone, sheer wall rising another 200 feet to the canyon rim. She was in the middle, suspended in space, unreachable from below, unreachable from above unless you had climbing gear and knew exactly where to look. You're awake. Good. David stood on the platform with her. The platform was barely big enough for 2 people. He was pressed against the canyon wall. She was pressed against the opposite edge, 6 feet of wooden deck between them, and nothing but air on 3 sides. "Let me go." Her voice was hoarse. "I can't do that. Not yet. You need to learn the lesson first." "What lesson?" "Patience, waiting, existing in suspension. Most people never truly wait. They're always moving towards something, always planning the next step, always progressing. But what if there is no next step? What if you're simply suspended in the present with no way forward and no way back? What then? This is insane. This is philosophy. You're a systems analyst, Rebecca. You optimize, you plan, you calculate the most efficient path. But what happens when there's no path? When you're simply here with no optimization possible? He pulled a water bottle from his pack. "You need to drink. Dehydration will kill you before you learn anything." He held the bottle to her lips. She wanted to refuse, but thirst was overwhelming. She drank. "I'm going to keep you here," David said. "On this platform. I built it 6 months ago. It's solid. The cables are rated for 3,000 pounds. The anchors are bomber. You're not falling. But you're not leaving either. You're suspended. People are looking for me. I know. I'm leading the search teams. I'm very thorough, very dedicated. Everyone comments on how hard I'm working to find you. They don't realize I already know exactly where you are." Rebecca's blood went cold. "You're part of the search?" "I organized the search. I'm the most experienced volunteer. Everyone trusts me. When I say we've cleared a section, they believe me. When I lead teams away from this area, they follow. You're invisible because I'm controlling what people see." He stood. The platform shifted slightly. Rebecca's heart jumped. "I'll bring food and water every 3 days. Enough to survive, but not enough to be comfortable. You're going to learn to exist in this moment, on this platform, between earth and sky. That's the lesson." He pulled out climbing gear, harness, rope, carabiners. "Wait, how do you leave?" "I rappel from the rim at night. I fixed ropes that can't be seen from below. I climb up and disappear. You stay. That's the design." He clipped into his rope. "Please," Rebecca said. "Please don't leave me here." "You'll adapt. Humans always adapt. That's the beauty of it. 3 days from now, you'll still be here, still suspended, still learning patience." He rappelled up, disappeared over the rim. Rebecca was alone, suspended 300 feet up a canyon wall with her hands tied behind her back and no possible escape. The sun beat down. The platform was exposed. No shade, no shelter. Just 6 feet of wooden deck and hundreds of feet of empty air. She screamed. Her voice echoed through the canyon. No one answered. The side canyon was too remote, the walls too high. No hikers would hear her. No helicopters would see her unless they knew exactly where to look. She was invisible in plain sight. The first day nearly killed her. Heat exhaustion. The platform absorbed sun until it burned to touch. Rebecca couldn't shade herself, couldn't move, could only sit and endure. By evening, she was delirious. By night, she was hypothermic. Desert temperature dropped 40 degrees after sunset. She had no jacket, no sleeping bag, just the clothes she'd been wearing when taken. She shivered until dawn. When sun returned, the heat returned. This was the cycle. Burn during day, freeze at night, survive both. On day 3, David returned. He rappelled down at 3 a.m., quiet, efficient. He brought water, food, a small tarp she could use for shade during the day and warmth at night. "You're learning," he said. "I can see it. You're not fighting anymore. You're accepting. That's progress." "How long?" Rebecca's voice was barely audible. "Until you understand. Until the suspension becomes normal. until you forget there was ever any other existence. Some people learn quickly. Some take months. I need you to reach that point where this platform is reality and everything else is just memory. Why? Because my daughter learned it. Learned to exist in impossible suspension. She had leukemia. Suspended between living and dying for 18 months. Couldn't plan for future. Couldn't return to past. Just existed in the eternal present of treatment and waiting and hoping. She learned patience I'll never have. I want to understand what she understood, how she endured. So I create suspension for others and watch them learn. Your daughter? Emma. She died 3 years ago, age 14. She spent her final year suspended in hospital rooms, waiting for test results, waiting for treatment effects, waiting for impossible cures. She never complained, never begged to leave, just existed in each moment with grace I couldn't comprehend. I'm trying to learn that grace by studying others in suspension. He cut the zip ties on her wrists. I'm trusting you not to jump. You'll need your hands for the tarp and food. Rebecca's arms screamed as circulation returned. She pulled them forward. They shook violently. 3 days until my next visit, David said. Learn the patience. He climbed back up into darkness. Rebecca was alone again, but now she had water, food, a tarp, and her hands were free. She could move. She examined the platform carefully. The wood was solid, 2x6 lumber. The cables attached through eye bolts drilled through the deck corners. She pulled on a cable. It didn't budge. He wasn't lying about the construction quality. She looked up at where the cables attached to the wall. 30 feet straight up. Smooth sandstone. No handholds, even if she could climb, which she couldn't without gear. The cables themselves were too thin to grip safely. She looked down. 200 feet to canyon floor. Even with rope, she didn't have rappelling skills. She'd fall. She was trapped. Perfectly trapped on a platform designed to prevent any escape. Day became week. Week became month. David came every 3 days like clockwork. Always at 3 a.m. Always with supplies. Always with observations about her progress toward understanding suspension. Rebecca learned the rhythm. Hot days, cold nights, food every 3 days, water rationed carefully between visits. She learned to drape the tarp for maximum shade, learned to huddle under it at night for warmth, learned to sleep sitting up with her back against the canyon wall. She learned patience, not the spiritual patience David talked about, survival patience. The kind that let her endure one more day suspended in impossible space. By week 4, the search and rescue helicopters stopped flying overhead. By week 6, Rebecca realized they'd given up. By week 8, she accepted she might die on this platform. But she didn't die. Her body adapted, lost weight, muscles atrophied from lack of movement, skin darkened from constant sun. But she survived. And she watched David climb up his fixed ropes every 3 days, watched the route he took, memorized every movement. On day 73, Rebecca made a decision. She was going to climb those ropes or die trying. The ropes were impossible to reach. They hung from the rim 30 feet above the platform. No way to access them without climbing the sheer sandstone wall first. But Rebecca noticed something. The cables that held the platform were attached at the same anchor points as David's ropes. She could see the bolts. 3 separate bolts. 1 for each platform cable. 1 for David's climbing rope. If she could climb the cable, she could reach the bolt. If she could reach the bolt, she could maybe transfer to David's rope. If she could transfer to his rope, she could maybe climb to the rim. It was impossible. But staying was death. She started training, used the cable like a rope, practiced pulling her body weight up, did pull-ups hanging from the cable above the platform, built strength that had atrophied over 2 months of sitting. It hurt. Her muscles screamed. Her hands tore open, gripping the thin steel cable. But she kept training. David noticed on his next visit. "You're exercising," he said. Day 82. "That's good. Physical activity helps mental state during suspension." He didn't realize she was preparing to escape. Rebecca trained for 2 more weeks. On day 96, she was ready. She waited until the day after David's visit. That gave her maximum time before he'd return. Maximum chance of getting far enough away before he discovered she was gone. She started climbing at dawn when her hands were still warm. The cable was thin, maybe 1/2 inch diameter. Steel. It cut into her palms immediately, but she'd built calluses from 2 weeks of training. She pulled herself up, hand over hand. The platform swayed below her, 200 feet of air beneath her feet. If she fell, she died. She didn't look down. She climbed. 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet. Her arms burned. Her hands bled. The cable cut through calluses into raw flesh. 20 feet, 25 feet. She could see the bolt now, 3 feet above her. Professional climbing anchor, with 3 cables attached and 1 rope. She reached the bolt, wrapped her legs around the cable, grabbed the bolt with her left hand, pulled herself up until she was level with it. David's rope hung next to the cable. Orange climbing rope, 9 millimeters, standard diameter. She reached for it. Her hand closed around the rope. She transferred her weight from cable to rope. The rope held. Rebecca hung there, 230 feet above the canyon floor, gripping a rope with bleeding hands. But she was on the rope. She started climbing. Rock climbing uses technique, footwork, body positioning. Rebecca didn't have that training. She just pulled. Raw strength, desperation. She climbed. 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. The rim was 40 feet above the bolt, 70 feet total from her starting point on the cable. 50 feet, 60 feet. Her hands were shredded. Blood made the rope slippery. Her arms shook so violently she could barely hold on. 70 feet. Her hand reached over the rim, touched sand, rock, ground. She pulled, scraped over the rim, collapsed on solid ground. She was off the platform. She'd escaped. Rebecca lay on the canyon rim for 10 minutes. Couldn't move. Her body had nothing left. But she was free. She forced herself up, looked around. Desert landscape, juniper trees, sandstone formations, and in the distance, maybe 2 miles away, she could see the paved road through Zion. She started walking, barefoot, hands destroyed, body skeletal from 3 months of minimal food, but walking toward civilization, toward rescue, toward the end of suspension. She made it 1/2 mile before she collapsed. David found her 3 hours later. He was furious. "You weren't supposed to climb. That's not the lesson. The lesson is patience, acceptance. You rejected the teaching." He carried her back. She was too weak to fight. He placed her back on the platform, but this time he didn't cut the zip ties. "No more freedom," he said. "You've proven you can't be trusted. We start over. Suspension until you learn." He left. Rebecca sat on the platform with her hands bound again, back where she started. But she'd touched the rim. She'd proven escape was possible. Next time, she'd run faster. She never got a next time. Because on day 104, Jake Martinez and Anna Chen rappelled into the side canyon and saw her. Saw the impossible platform with the impossible woman suspended in impossible space. Called for rescue. Within 4 hours, technical rescue teams had rigged systems to access the platform. Within 6 hours, Rebecca Chen was being loaded into a helicopter, Within 8 hours, she was in a hospital bed at Dixie Regional Medical Center in St. George. Within 12 hours, the FBI had arrested David Morrison at the search staging area, where he was coordinating volunteers looking for Rebecca while knowing exactly where she was. The investigation was swift. David Morrison had built the platform 6 months before kidnapping Rebecca. Built it specifically, professionally, using his search and rescue skills and climbing expertise. His house contained notebooks, detailed observations on 3 previous victims. Sarah Martinez, age 28. Subject 1, suspended for 47 days. Died from dehydration when David was delayed by weather and couldn't deliver water. Thomas Rivera, age 35. Subject 2, suspended for 89 days. Died from injuries sustained attempting escape. Fell from platform. Jennifer Wu, age 26. Subject 3, suspended for 116 days. Rescued by hikers. Committed suicide 2 weeks after rescue. Couldn't adjust to living without suspension. Rebecca was subject 4, the only one rescued before death or permanent psychological damage. When FBI agents approached David at the search staging area, he didn't resist, didn't speak, just held up his hands and let them cuff him. The trial was November 2024. David Morrison faced 3 counts of murder and 1 count of kidnapping. The prosecution had overwhelming evidence: notebooks, the platform itself, Rebecca's testimony, witnesses who'd seen David searching for Rebecca while knowing exactly where she was. The defense argued insanity, that David's daughter's death had broken him, that he wasn't criminally responsible. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Rebecca testified on day 9. She walked into the courtroom using a cane. Her legs had atrophied from 3 months of sitting. She still couldn't walk unassisted. She told the jury about the platform, the heat, the cold, the calculated suspension between earth and sky, the psychological torture of watching rescue helicopters fly past without seeing her, the realization that the man leading her search was her captor. She was compelling, detailed, devastating. David Morrison sat silently through her testimony, taking notes, not looking at her, just writing in a notebook identical to the ones police had seized. The prosecution finished. The defense declined to cross-examine. The judge asked if David had anything to say. He stood, looked at Rebecca for the first time, and spoke the words that would define the entire case. "You climbed on day 96. Silence. Rebecca's face went white. "What?" the judge asked. David continued staring at Rebecca. "On day 96, you climbed the cable to the rim. I found boot marks in the sand, blood on the rocks where you scraped over the edge. You made it 4,372 feet from the rim before collapsing. I documented everything." He opened his notebook. "The climb took you 47 minutes. Your hands bled through in 19 minutes. You rested twice, once at the bolt, once at 63 feet. Your body temperature had dropped to 94.7 degrees by the time I found you. You were hypothermic from blood loss and exhaustion." The courtroom was silent. "But you climbed. You rejected the suspension, rejected the lesson about patience. And that's when I knew I'd failed with you. Just like I failed with Sarah, who tried to jump. Failed with Thomas, who tried to climb and fell. Failed with Jennifer, who learned the lesson but couldn't survive its removal." He looked at Rebecca with something like sadness. "I thought you'd be the one who understood, who learned what Emma learned, how to exist in the impossible moment with grace. But you climbed, you fought, you refused to accept. And I realized my methodology was flawed. That suspension isn't teachable. Either you have it naturally, like Emma did, or you don't. And most people don't." He closed the notebook. "I failed my daughter by trying to understand her, when I should have just accepted that some grace is incomprehensible. I failed 4 women trying to manufacture what can't be made. I'm guilty of everything they say, but not because I'm insane, because I was trying to understand an impossible thing. He sat down. The courtroom erupted. The jury took 2 hours to find him guilty on all counts. Judge sentenced him to 4 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. He showed no emotion, just opened his notebook and continued writing. Rebecca Chen spent 4 months in physical therapy, learning to walk again, building strength in atrophied muscles, healing the damage 3 months of suspension had done to her body. But the physical damage healed. The psychological damage took years. She couldn't handle heights anymore, couldn't stand on balconies or look over railings or hike trails with exposure. The memory of hanging suspended with empty air below was too strong. She moved back to San Francisco, quit her job at the tech company, started working from home in a ground-floor apartment with windows facing a courtyard instead of open space. Her therapist diagnosed it as acrophobia combined with PTSD. Her brain had associated height with trauma, but slowly, impossibly, she healed. Small victories accumulated. Month 6, rode elevator to 3rd floor without panic attack. Year 1, flew on an airplane, chose aisle seat, survived without looking out window. Year 2, hiked a trail with a vista point, stood at the railing briefly, left without breaking down. Year 3, swam in a lake instead of a pool, felt suspended in open water, managed the fear. Year 4, visited Zion National Park, not the Narrows but the main canyon, stood at a vista point, breathed through the memories. Year 5, climbed Coit Tower in San Francisco, stood at the top, looked down, survived. She wrote a book. Suspended, 104 days on a platform and the fight to touch ground again. Published September 2025. Became a New York Times bestseller. The book opened with the rescue, climbers seeing her on the platform, then flashed back to her last normal day, then chronicled every aspect of the 104 days, the heat, the cold, the starvation, the training, the climb, the recapture, the final rescue. Critics called it unflinching and devastating and essential reading for anyone who wants to understand survival. Survivors of other captivity situations called it the first book that got it right. Families of missing persons called it hope in book form. Rebecca donated all proceeds to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and to search and rescue organizations that operated with proper oversight and psychological screening. The book changed conversations about long-term captivity. Before Rebecca's book, most captivity narratives focused on the dramatic rescue. Rebecca focused on the dailiness of survival, the small decisions, the mental negotiations, the body's adaptation, the moment-by-moment choice to continue. People want the big moments, she said in interviews, the climb, the rescue, the courtroom confession. But survival isn't big moments. It's 10,000 small ones. It's choosing to drink water when you don't want to. Choosing to sleep even though nightmares wait. Choosing to do pull-ups on a cable even though your hands are bleeding. Those small choices accumulate into survival. She testified before Congress about the dangers of allowing untrained volunteers to lead search and rescue operations without proper oversight. Her testimony led to new federal regulations requiring background checks and psychological screening for SAR volunteers in national parks. The regulations weren't popular with everyone. Some longtime volunteers felt insulted, but Rebecca was firm. David Morrison volunteered for 12 years, she testified. Helped find dozens of missing people, saved lives. Everyone trusted him. And then he used that trust to kidnap 4 women and kill 3 of them. Background checks won't catch everyone. Psychological screening won't prevent all abuse. but they'll catch some, and some is better than none. The regulations passed. Every national park now requires SAR volunteers to undergo criminal background checks and psychological evaluation before leading search operations. The evaluations happen annually, and if someone's daughter dies and their behavior changes, someone notices. It's not perfect, but it's better. Rebecca became an advocate for survivors of long-term captivity, spoke at conferences, led support groups, helped others navigate life after trauma. She created a checklist for trauma survivors. The Small Victories List. First week after rescue. Eat one meal you actually taste. Sleep through one full night. Touch something that feels safe. Say one true thing about what happened. Accept one offer of help. First month. Leave the hospital or safe location once. Make one decision about your own care. Recognize one emotion other than fear. Have one conversation about something normal. Acknowledge one thing that's different now. First year. Do one thing the old you would have done. Try one new thing the new you might like. Set one boundary around what you'll discuss. Celebrate one victory, no matter how small. Forgive yourself once for not being the same. Every year. After. Recognize how far you've come. Acknowledge what still hurts. Find one way to help someone else. Touch ground and remember you're here. Choose one more day. The list became famous among trauma therapists. Simple. Achievable. Focused on tiny steps instead of impossible leaps. People expect you to be grateful, Rebecca told her support groups, and you are grateful. You're alive, but you're also angry and traumatized and changed. You can be both. Gratitude and trauma aren't opposites. They coexist. That's okay. You're allowed to be complicated. 3 years after her rescue, Rebecca received a letter from Jennifer Wu's mother. Jennifer Wu. Subject 3. The woman who'd been rescued from a different platform 116 days into her captivity, who'd survived, who'd seemed okay, who'd killed herself 2 weeks later because she couldn't adjust to living without suspension. The letter was short. Dear Rebecca, my daughter Jennifer was rescued from a similar platform to yours. She came home. She seemed fine. Then 2 weeks later, I found her in our garage. She'd hung herself. I've spent 3 years trying to understand why she survived 116 days on a platform, but couldn't survive 2 weeks at home. Your book explained it. The chapter about reverse adaptation, about how our brains rewire for captivity and can't always rewire back, about how some people's nervous systems become dependent on the patterns of captivity. I finally understand that Jennifer's death wasn't a choice to leave us. It was her nervous system's inability to exist without the structure of suspension. Her brain had adapted so completely that normal life felt intolerable. Thank you for writing that chapter. Thank you for explaining what the therapists couldn't. Thank you for helping me understand my daughter. She loved you, by the way. She read articles about your rescue while she was recovering. She told me you were brave for climbing even though it failed. She said you gave her hope that fighting mattered even when you don't win. I think she would have liked to meet you. I think you could have helped her survive what came after. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for being proof that reverse adaptation is possible. Thank you for showing families like mine that death isn't inevitable. With gratitude and grief, Elaine Wu. Rebecca cried for an hour after reading that letter. Then she wrote back. Her response was longer. Dear Elaine, I'm so sorry about Jennifer. I think about her often. I think about how she survived 116 days, longer than I did, and how that should have been enough, but wasn't. You're right about reverse adaptation. Our brains learn to survive impossible circumstances by rewiring. But sometimes the rewiring is so complete that normal circumstances become impossible. I struggled with this too. Still do. My brain learned to survive suspension. When I first came home, I felt like I was falling constantly. Standing on solid ground felt wrong. My nervous system expected suspension, expected the platform, expected the cycle of heat and cold and visits every 3 days. Normal felt intolerable. The difference between Jennifer and me isn't strength, it's luck. I had resources. I had insurance that covered trauma therapy 5 days a week for 2 years. I had family that understood I needed ground floor apartments and courtyard views and patience measured in years, not weeks. I had time and space to rebuild slowly. Jennifer might not have had those things. 2 weeks isn't enough time to rewire back. 2 weeks is still in the crisis phase, still in the moment where your brain is screaming that something is wrong, because suspension ended, and suspension was the only reality it knew. If Jennifer had had more time, more support, more understanding that her brain needed years, not weeks, she might have survived. Her death isn't a failure. It's evidence of how completely captivity changes us. It's proof that we need better systems for supporting survivors of long-term trauma. I'm working on that. I'm creating programs specifically for survivors of extended captivity. Programs that understand reverse adaptation is real and hard and takes time measured in years. It's too late for Jennifer, but it might save the next person. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for sharing Jennifer's story. Thank you for fighting to understand even when understanding brings more pain. Your daughter was brave. She survived 116 days. That matters. The fact that she couldn't survive what came after doesn't diminish what she endured. It just means we failed to create a world that could hold her changed brain. I'm trying to fix that. With respect and solidarity, Rebecca Chen. She sent the letter. 6 months later, Elaine Wu became a board member of the Suspension Project. Together, they created the Jennifer Wu Reverse Adaptation Program, a residential treatment facility specifically for survivors of long-term captivity, where people could spend 6 months to 2 years learning to exist without the structures of their captivity, where reverse adaptation was treated as seriously as the original trauma. The first facility opened in Northern California in 2028. It helped 7 people in its first year. 7 people who might have become statistics like Jennifer Wu. 7 people who learned that their brains could adapt again. That suspension could end. That ground could feel normal again if given enough time. Rebecca visited the facility often, talked to residents about her own reverse adaptation journey, about how it took 5 years before standing on solid ground felt natural instead of wrong, about how her brain still sometimes expected the platform, expected the heat and cold cycles, expected David Morrison to appear every 3 days with food and observations. That expectation might never fully go away, she told them. My therapist calls it a neural groove. My brain carved a deep groove for platform survival. That groove is still there. Probably always will be. But I've carved other grooves now. Deeper grooves. Swimming, working, helping others. These new grooves are becoming default instead of the captivity groove. She showed them her hands, the scars from climbing the cable. These remind me that I chose, that I had agency even when everything was designed to take it away. When your brain tells you that captivity was normal and freedom is wrong, look for evidence that you chose, that you fought, that you were never just a victim. You were always a person with agency making decisions in impossible circumstances. The residents would touch her scars gently, reverently, like touching proof that survival was possible. Did it hurt? They'd ask. The climbing? Terribly, Rebecca would answer honestly. Worst physical pain of my life. But worse than the pain of staying? No. The pain of action was better than the pain of acceptance. That's how I knew it was the right choice, even though it failed. What if I can't find my moment to climb? A resident asked once. Young woman, 19, had been held in a basement for 3 years, still felt like basements were where she belonged. Then you don't climb, Rebecca said. Not everyone's survival involves dramatic action. Some people survive by enduring, by outlasting, by waiting until rescue finds them instead of escaping. That's valid too. The point isn't climbing. The point is choosing. Whatever choice you make, fighting, enduring, adapting, resisting, that's your agency. That's your proof that you're not just what happened to you. The young woman cried. Rebecca held her. You're here, Rebecca whispered. You're out of the basement. You're learning that ground floors can be safe. That's your climb. It looks different than mine, but it's just as real. 4 years after her rescue, Rebecca was contacted by the FBI. They'd found another platform, northern Arizona, canyon similar to Zion, suspended systems similar to the one David Morrison had built. But Morrison was in prison. Couldn't have built this one. Someone else had copied his design. We need your expertise, Agent Rodriguez said. You're the only survivor of platform suspension who can help us understand what we're looking at. Rebecca flew to Arizona, stood at the rim of a canyon that looked too much like the one that had held her, looked down, saw the platform. Her breath caught. The design was nearly identical. 6x4 wooden deck, steel cables, professional anchor bolts, suspended 300 feet up, 200 feet below the rim. How long? She asked. We don't know. We found it yesterday during a search for a missing hiker. No one is on it currently, but it's provisioned. Food, water, tarps. Someone built this intending to use it. Rebecca's hands shook. You need to take it down. Now. Today. Before someone else. We are. Demolition team is here. But we need you to look at it first. Tell us if there are differences. Tell us if this person might have other platforms elsewhere. Tell us anything that might help us find them before they take someone. Rebecca rappelled down. She hadn't climbed or rappelled since her rescue. But some skills don't fade. Body remembers. She landed on the platform. It swayed slightly, exactly like she remembered. She looked around. The setup was nearly identical to Morrison's, but there were differences. This platform had a small tent. Morrison's hadn't. This platform had a chemical toilet. Morrison's hadn't provided that dignity. This platform had books, a small library secured in a waterproof box. Rebecca opened the box. Philosophy books, Nietzsche, Camus, Sartre, books about existing in impossible circumstances, about finding meaning in suffering. This person isn't trying to teach patience, Rebecca called up to the agents. They're trying to teach existential acceptance. It's different. Morrison wanted passive waiting. This person wants active philosophical engagement with suffering. She found a notebook. Read the first page. Victim will have access to texts about the absurd, about Sisyphus, about the necessity of imagining Sisyphus happy, about creating meaning in meaningless circumstances. They will learn to embrace their suspension as an opportunity for existential clarity. Rebecca's hands shook harder. This is worse, she called up. Morrison was studying adaptation. This person is trying to create enlightenment through suffering. They think they're doing victims a favor. They think suspension is spiritual. How do we find them? Look for philosophy professors, graduate students in existentialism. People who've published about suffering as a path to meaning. People who've lost someone and are trying to make that loss make sense. She looked at the books again, found one with an inscription. For Michael, may you find the meaning you sought. Love always, Professor Richardson. Professor Richardson, Rebecca called up. Find Professor Richardson. This is their platform. This is their gift to someone named Michael. The FBI found Professor Elizabeth Richardson 3 days later. Retired philosophy professor. University of Arizona. Her son Michael had died by suicide 2 years earlier. Left a note saying his life had no meaning, that he'd tried to find purpose and failed. Professor Richardson had built the platform as a memorial, was planning to bring lost souls to it, give them books and time and suspension, let them find meaning through imposed reflection. She'd intended to use it within the week. The FBI arrested her before she could take anyone. Rebecca testified at her trial. She's not like David Morrison, Rebecca told the court. Morrison knew he was causing suffering. Richardson thinks she's preventing it. She believes suspension and philosophical texts will give people the meaning her son couldn't find. She's wrong. She's dangerous. But she's not malicious. She's grief-broken and misguided. Professor Richardson was found guilty, but sentenced to psychiatric treatment facility instead of prison. The platform was demolished. The books were donated to prison libraries, and Rebecca added a new mission to the suspension project: monitor online forums for discussions about beneficial suffering and enlightenment through imposed adversity. There are more like her, Rebecca told her board. People who think they're helping by creating trauma. We need to find them before they build platforms. The project hired a team to monitor online spaces, to identify people showing concerning patterns, to report them to authorities before they acted. They prevented 3 more platform constructions in the next 2 years. 3 people who would have built suspension systems for enlightenment or understanding or growth. 3 sets of potential victims who never had to learn what Rebecca learned. That suspension isn't enlightenment. It's just suspension. And the only meaning in it is the meaning survivors create afterward, by refusing to let it define them. 5 years after her rescue, Rebecca stood in David Morrison's former cell. The prison had invited her, said she might want to see where he'd died, where he'd drawn hundreds of imagined platforms on the walls. She walked into the cell, saw the drawings: Subject 5, Subject 6, Subject 7, Subject 8, Subject 9, each one a different woman, different platform, different lesson about patience, all imaginary, all plans that died when he hung himself. Rebecca traced one drawing with her finger. Subject 7, platform with pulley system, more complex than hers had been. He never stopped, the prison psychologist said. Even in here, even knowing he'd never get out, he kept designing, kept planning, kept trying to understand what his daughter understood about enduring impossible circumstances. He never understood it, Rebecca said quietly, because it wasn't about enduring. Emma didn't endure her cancer with grace because she'd learned some secret about patience. She endured because she had no choice, and she loved her father enough to not make it harder for him by complaining. She performed grace for him, and he spent the rest of his life trying to manufacture in others what she'd faked for his benefit. The psychologist was silent. The tragedy, Rebecca continued, is that if he'd just grieved like a normal person, he could have honored her memory by living well. Instead, he honored her by destroying others, and she would have hated that. I guarantee you Emma Morrison would have hated what her father did in her name. Rebecca left the cell, drove back to San Francisco, didn't think about David Morrison again for 3 years. When she did think of him, it was only to note that he'd stopped being real in her mind, had become abstract, an idea, a case study, a cautionary tale. Not the man who drugged her and suspended her and told her that suffering was teaching. Just a chapter in a book, a story she told to help others understand, a ghost that had lost its power. That's how Rebecca knew she'd healed. When her captor became a story instead of a presence. When the platform became history instead of threat. When suspension became something she survived instead of something that defined her. She'd touched ground, and she'd never let go again. 10 years after her rescue, Rebecca stood at the rim of Zion Canyon. Not the side canyon where the platform had been. The main canyon. The safe tourist viewing area with railings and paved paths. She stood at the railing, looked down, 500 feet to the canyon floor, felt the space, felt the height, felt the memory of suspension, and breathed through it. "I'm here," she said to the canyon. "I survived you." The canyon didn't answer, but Rebecca didn't need it to. She'd already proven everything she needed to prove. She took a photo, standing at the railing, smiling. Her husband, Marcus, beside her, posted it to social media with the caption, "10 years, still standing, still surviving, still believing in miracles." The post got 10,000 likes, hundreds of comments from families of missing persons thanking her for hope, dozens of comments from other survivors sharing their stories. Rebecca read every single one, responded to every single one, because she knew what it meant to need someone to believe in your survival, and she would be that person for as many people as needed her, because the platform was gone. David Morrison was gone, but Rebecca Chen remained, standing on solid ground, building a life that proved survival wasn't just possible, but beautiful. The canyon remembered her. The rock remembered her. The space between earth and sky remembered the woman who hung there for 104 days and refused to accept it as reality. But Rebecca didn't need to return to be remembered. She was too busy living, too busy swimming, too busy helping others survive their own suspensions, too busy being proof that impossible things can be survived. The platform had been designed to break her, to teach her patience through suffering, to force acceptance. But Rebecca Chen learned a different lesson. She learned that patience isn't acceptance, that survival isn't grace, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse what someone else designed for you. She learned that climbing matters, even when you fail, even when they bring you back, even when the climb destroys your hands and leaves scars that never fade. The climbing matters because it proves you chose, and choice is everything. The platform is gone. The suspension is over. Rebecca Chen stands on solid ground, and she's never letting go again. David Morrison died in prison on March 15, 2029. Cause of death: suicide by hanging. Guards found him in his cell during morning check. He'd used torn bed sheets to hang himself from the ventilation grate, suspended himself, surrounded by drawings, hundreds of drawings covering every wall, all showing the same thing: a platform suspended in a canyon with a figure standing at the center. Subject 5, Subject 6, Subject 7, each drawing numbered, each showing a different imagined victim, different platform configurations, different suspension heights, different lessons about patience he'd never teach. He'd continued designing experiments in his mind until his mind suspended itself permanently. The drawings were entered into evidence in a posthumous psychological review. Rebecca Chen was notified of his death by FBI agent Maria Rodriguez. She was in her San Francisco apartment, leading a video support group for trauma survivors, when the call came. "How do you feel?" Rodriguez asked. Rebecca thought for a long moment. "I feel like the suspension finally ended. Not just mine. His. He spent 4 years after Emma's death suspended between grief and understanding, trying to learn what she knew, how she endured. But he was looking in the wrong place. Emma's grace wasn't about accepting suspension. It was about loving life even when suspended. He missed that completely. He created suspension without the love. That's why everyone broke. That's why I had to climb. Because suspension without love is just torture. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I am. He's gone. The platform is gone. I'm here, standing on solid ground." He wanted to prove that suspension was wisdom, but all he proved was that humans need earth beneath their feet, need stability, need to know where the ground is. He lost that. I found it again. She hung up, looked out her window, ground floor view, courtyard with trees, solid earth. She'd chosen this apartment for that view. No height, no suspension, just ground. And for the first time in 5 years, she felt completely safe. The platform was dismantled in April 2029. Technical rescue teams rappelled into the canyon and removed every bolt, every cable, every board. The wood was burned, the metal recycled, the location documented then deliberately forgotten. Nothing remains except the bolt holes in the sandstone, small scars where steel penetrated rock, where David Morrison built his laboratory for studying patients. 3 years after the platform came down, Rebecca Chen stood in a conference room in Portland, Oregon, speaking to 200 family members of missing persons. She'd been invited to share her story, to give hope, to explain how someone survives the impossible and comes back from it. "My name is Rebecca Chen," she said into the microphone. 3,147 days ago, I went hiking in Zion National Park. 104 days later, I was found alive on a platform suspended 300 feet up a canyon wall. The man who put me there was leading the search to find me. The room was silent. People ask me how I survived. They want to know the secret, the trick, the mental technique that kept me alive. And I tell them the truth. There is no secret. There's only one more day, one more sunrise, one more breath. That's all survival is. Not wisdom, not strength, just refusing to stop. She clicked to the next slide. A photograph of the canyon platform taken by rescue teams, the wooden deck suspended in impossible space. This platform was designed to break me, to teach me patience through suffering, to force me to accept suspension as reality. But I never accepted it. Every single day for 104 days, I planned escape. I trained. I prepared. And on day 96, I climbed. Another slide. Medical photographs of her hands after the climb. Shredded palms. Blood. Raw flesh. I failed that escape. He found me half a mile from the rim and brought me back. But I'd proven something to myself. That I could choose action over acceptance. That suspension wasn't inevitable. That I had agency even when everything was designed to take it away. She paused. Let the room absorb it. Your loved ones who are missing, they're fighting too. Every day they're alive, they're making the same choice I made. One more day, one more attempt, one more refusal to give up. Don't let the statistics make you believe they're gone. Don't let the closed searches make you stop looking. Someone found me on day 104. Someone could find them tomorrow. An older woman in the front row raised her hand. My daughter has been missing for 8 years. How do I keep hoping after 8 years? Rebecca walked to the edge of the stage, crouched down to eye level with the woman. You hope because the alternative is unacceptable. You hope because your daughter might be like Jennifer Wu, who survived 116 days before I did, who was found alive, who proved that long-term survival is possible. You hope because someone right now might be looking at a photograph of your daughter and recognizing her, because miracles happen, because I'm standing here when I should be dead. That's why you hope. The woman started crying. Rebecca stayed there. Let her cry. Let the room feel it. But also, Rebecca said quietly, you need to survive your hope. You need to build a life that can hold both the hoping and the living. That's what my family learned. My parents didn't put their lives on hold for 104 days. They searched, yes. They hoped, yes. But they also kept living. Because if they hadn't, they wouldn't have been strong enough to help me recover when I came back. Take care of yourself while you hope. Your loved one needs you whole. She stood, returned to the podium. Let me tell you about the search operation, because understanding how searches work might help you advocate for your loved ones. Rebecca clicked through slides showing search operations, helicopters, K9 teams, technical rescue personnel. The search for me involved 300 volunteers over 12 days. That sounds massive, and it was, but Zion National Park covers 229 square miles. The Narrows alone is 16 miles long. 300 people searching for 12 days can only cover a fraction of the possible area. She pulled up a map, marked areas in different colors. This is what they searched. These red areas are where they looked first. High probability zones based on my last known location. These yellow areas are medium probability. These green areas are low probability, but still possible. She pointed to a small blue dot outside all the colored zones. This is where I actually was, outside every search area, in a location so remote and unlikely that no search coordinator would prioritize it. And the reason it wasn't searched is because David Morrison, who was leading many of the search teams, deliberately avoided it. A man in the back called out, "How do you prevent that? How do you know if someone on the search team is hiding something?" "You can't," Rebecca said. "Not completely. But background checks help. The regulations that passed after my case require anyone leading search operations in national parks to undergo psychological evaluation and criminal background checks. It's not perfect, but it's better than trusting people just because they volunteer." She advanced to the next slide, a photograph of a K9 unit. The dogs lost my scent 200 yards from my tent. The handlers assumed I'd entered the water and the scent washed away. That's a logical assumption in the Narrows where water is everywhere. But the real reason my scent disappeared is because David carried me. He drugged me, carried me 3 miles through the canyon to his vehicle, drove me to the platform site, and carried me up to the platform. No scent trail, no tracks, no evidence. "So how do you find someone in that scenario?" someone asked. Persistence. Someone kept searching. Recreational climbers kept exploring the canyons. And on day 104, they happened to be in the exact right place to see me. It wasn't the official search that found me. It was 2 people who refused to believe the canyon had no more secrets. She looked out at the audience. 200 faces, 200 families, each one carrying the weight of someone missing. Don't give up on the unofficial searching. Don't give up on posting flyers and checking hiking forums and asking climbers to keep eyes open. Official searches end, but people like Jake Martinez and Anna Chen keep exploring, keep looking, and sometimes they find what the official search missed. Rebecca clicked to a new section, medical slides. Let me talk about the physical recovery, because if your loved one is found, you need to know what they might need. A slide showing her medical chart. Weight, 94 pounds. Height, 5'6". BMI, 15.2. Severe malnutrition. Stage 2 dehydration. Second-degree burns on exposed skin. Muscle atrophy in all major muscle groups. Pressure sores from prolonged sitting. I lost 41 pounds in 104 days. My body had consumed muscle to survive. I couldn't walk unassisted for 3 weeks after rescue. Couldn't climb stairs for 2 months. Couldn't run for 6 months. My body had adapted to captivity by shutting down everything non-essential. She showed photographs from her recovery. Week 1, in a wheelchair. Week 4, using a walker. Week 12, walking with a cane. Week 24, hiking a flat trail. Physical therapy was brutal. My muscles had to relearn basic functions. But bodies are amazing. They heal if you give them time and proper care. By month 6, I was mostly functional. By year 1, I could pass for normal. She paused. But normal is relative. I still can't do stairs quickly. Still can't run more than a mile. Still have chronic pain in my legs from the atrophy. The body heals, but it remembers. A slide showing her hands. The scars from climbing the cable still visible 3 years later. These scars are from my escape attempt. The cable cut through skin down to bone in some places. The scarring is permanent, but I wear them proudly. They're proof I fought. Proof I didn't accept what he wanted me to accept. Every time I look at my hands, I remember that I chose action over submission. The next section was harder. Now let me talk about the psychological recovery. This is the part nobody prepares you for. The part that's harder than the physical healing. A slide showing a simple graph. Trauma response over time. For the first month after rescue, I was fine, grateful, happy, relieved. People called it the honeymoon phase. I'd survived. I was free. Everything was good. The graph showed a sharp decline at month 2. Then the reality hit. I'd been changed. My brain had rewired itself to survive suspension. When I closed my eyes, I felt like I was falling. When I looked out windows, I saw empty space below. When I stood on anything elevated, my body panicked. The trauma wasn't in the past. It was in my present, in my body, in my nervous system. She showed photos of panic attacks, hospital visits, therapy sessions. I was diagnosed with PTSD, acrophobia, and generalized anxiety disorder. I couldn't work, couldn't function, couldn't be the person I was before. And that's when I realized that person was dead. She died on the platform. I was someone new, someone built from broken pieces. A woman in the 3rd row asked, "Did it get better?" Yes, but not the way you'd think. It didn't get better by going back to normal. It got better by accepting that normal was gone, by building a new normal, by learning to be the person I am now, instead of trying to be the person I was then. She showed a photo of herself swimming. I can't hike anymore. The exposure terrifies me, but I can swim. Water feels safe. It's suspension without falling. It's being held instead of hanging. So I swim. Every day. That's my new way of moving through space. Another photo of her apartment. I live on the ground floor. Windows face a courtyard. No heights, no vistas, no views that make me feel suspended. Some people might see that as limitation. I see it as adaptation. I've built a life that my nervous system can handle. That's not weakness. That's survival. Rebecca advanced to the final section of her presentation. Let me tell you about the courtroom moment that defined everything. The moment when David Morrison spoke. She played a video, courtroom footage. David standing, looking at Rebecca. You climbed on day 96. The room watched the video, watched Rebecca's face go white, watched the courtroom erupt. Rebecca stopped the video. In that moment, he proved what his entire experiment was about. He wasn't studying patience. He was documenting failure. Every victim who didn't accept suspension was a failure to him. Every attempt to escape was proof that his theory was wrong. But he kept trying, kept taking people, kept building platforms, because he couldn't accept that his daughter's grace wasn't reproducible. She looked out at the audience. The thing about David Morrison that nobody talks about is this. He was a victim too. Not of kidnapping, of grief. His daughter's death broke something in him that never healed. And instead of processing that grief, he externalized it. He created experiments. He took people. He tried to manufacture understanding through suffering. Are you saying he wasn't responsible? Someone asked sharply. No, he was absolutely responsible. He chose to hurt people, chose to kill people, chose to continue even after Sarah Martinez died from dehydration, even after Thomas Rivera fell to his death. He had agency. He used it to cause suffering. That's why he's in prison. She paused. But understanding why he did it helps us prevent others like him. David Morrison was a respected search and rescue volunteer for 12 years before he took his first victim. 12 years of helping people, of saving lives. Then his daughter died, and something changed. If there had been psychological support, if there had been screening, if someone had noticed his grief turning into obsession, maybe those 4 women would still be alive. She clicked to her final slide, a photograph of herself on Coit Tower, 5 years after rescue, standing at the railing, looking out over San Francisco, smiling. This photo was taken last month, 5 years and 3 months after my rescue. I'm standing 210 feet above ground, looking down, and I'm not panicking. It took 5 years to get here. 5 years of therapy, 5 years of small victories, 5 years of building a new normal. She looked at the audience. If your loved one is found, they'll need time. Years, probably. They'll need support. They'll need patience. They'll need you to accept that they're not the person they were before, but they can heal. They can build new lives. They can find new normals. I'm proof. The room was silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone was clapping. Standing ovation for the woman who climbed off a platform suspended in space and built a new life on solid ground. Rebecca wiped tears from her eyes. Thank you, she said. Keep hoping. Keep searching. Keep believing. Miracles happen. I'm standing here because Jake Martinez and Anna Chen didn't give up exploring. Because someone looked in the exact right direction at the exact right time. That could happen for your loved one too. She stepped off the stage. Dozens of people surrounded her, wanting to talk, wanting to hug, wanting to thank her for hope. She stayed for 3 hours, talked to everyone who needed to talk, hugged everyone who needed to hug, gave hope to everyone who needed it. Because she knew what it was like to be suspended between hope and grief. And she knew how much it meant when someone survived to tell you that survival was possible. That night, Rebecca drove back to San Francisco, 6 hours down I-5, evening traffic. She listened to podcasts about trauma recovery and neuroplasticity, about how brains heal, how bodies adapt, how humans rebuild after impossible things. She thought about the platform. 3 years dismantled, metal recycled, wood burned, location forgotten, but not gone. The platform would never be gone from her memory. She'd carry it forever. The heat, the cold, the empty space, the sensation of hanging between earth and sky with nowhere to go. But she'd also carry the climb. The moment her hand touched the cable, the moment she chose action over acceptance, the moment she proved to herself that she had agency even when everything was designed to take it away. That moment defined her more than the 104 days of suspension. She got home at midnight. Ground floor apartment, windows facing courtyard, safe. She poured a glass of water, stood at her window, looked at the trees in the courtyard lit by exterior lights. No height, no space, no falling, just ground. She raised her glass to the window. Today, 104, she whispered. The day the suspension ended. She drank, set the glass down, checked her email, had a message from Jake Martinez, the climber who'd found her. Hey, Rebecca. Wanted to let you know Anna and I are getting married next month. She's insisting we invite you. Please come. You're the reason we believe in not giving up. Love to see you there. Rebecca smiled, typed a response. Wouldn't miss it. Congratulations. You two saved my life. I'll save you a dance. Sent it. Closed her laptop. Went to bed in her ground floor apartment where no height could find her, and dreamed of swimming, of water holding her without letting her fall, of suspension that felt like safety instead of torture. In the morning, she'd wake and go swimming. She'd move through water like she used to move through mountains. Different motion, different medium, different person, but still motion, still living, still refusing to stop. Because that's what Rebecca Chen did. She survived, she adapted, she rebuilt, and she never let go of the ground again. 6 years after her rescue, Rebecca published her second book, After Suspension, a guide to rebuilding life after long-term captivity. It became the standard resource for trauma therapists working with survivors of extended kidnapping. 7 years after her rescue, she started a nonprofit, the Suspension Project, providing resources and support for families of missing persons and survivors of long-term captivity. 8 years after her rescue, she testified before the Senate again, this time about improving search and rescue coordination between federal, state, and local agencies. 9 years after her rescue, she got married. Software engineer named Marcus, who worked from home and understood her need for ground floors and courtyard views and never asked why she couldn't do heights. 10 years after her rescue, she stood at the rim of Zion Canyon, not the side canyon where the platform had been, the main canyon, the safe tourist viewing area with railings and paved paths. She stood at the railing, looked down, 500 feet to the canyon floor, felt the space, felt the height, felt the memory of suspension, and breathed through it. I'm here, she said to the canyon. I survived you. The canyon didn't answer, but Rebecca didn't need it to. She'd already proven everything she needed to prove. She took a photo, standing at the railing, smiling, her husband Marcus beside her, posted it to social media with the caption, 10 years, still standing, still surviving, still believing in miracles. The post got 10,000 likes, hundreds of comments from families of missing persons thanking her for hope, dozens of comments from other survivors sharing their stories. Rebecca read every single one, responded to every single one, because she knew what it meant to need someone to believe in your survival, and she would be that person for as many people as needed her. Because the platform was gone, David Morrison was gone, but Rebecca Chen remained, standing on solid ground, building a life that proved survival wasn't just possible, but beautiful. The canyon remembered her. The rock remembered her. The space between earth and sky remembered the woman who hung there for 104 days and refused to accept it as reality. But Rebecca didn't need to return to be remembered. She was too busy living, too busy swimming, too busy helping others survive their own suspensions, too busy being proof that impossible things can be survived. The platform had been designed to break her, to teach her patience through suffering, to force acceptance. But Rebecca Chen learned a different lesson. She learned that patience isn't acceptance, that survival isn't grace, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse what someone else designed for you. She learned that climbing matters, even when you fail, even when they bring you back, even when the climb destroys your hands and leaves scars that never fade. The climbing matters because it proves you chose, and choice is everything. The platform is gone. The suspension is over. Rebecca Chen stands on solid ground, and she's never letting go again.